You know nobody's coming ever to rescue you, right? Nobody gets a flower.
Hanrahan Live.
Today we speak to creative director Ben Ditto. He talks to us about the AI robot he's developing and what it means to have a soul.
What I'm most interested in at the minute, you've ended up working in kind of the two areas that everyone is terrified of right now, right? So like AI, robotics, they're gonna take over, kill everybody, whatever. How have you ended up doing that? Like, tell us about Yaya Labs. Like, when I looked at you doing that, I was like, that's a really interesting crossover.
Yeah, so Yaya Labs I was basically headhunted for that role. And what happened was I think I've been using AI in creative work since probably 2018, maybe 2017. And at that stage, it was really like, GitHub repositories and sort of basic Python script. And, just a handful of people were doing interesting stuff with it. And we used it in 1975 stuff and Days Beauty stuff. And I did a bit of personal work with it. And I had been working in print publishing for a long time, and I found this stuff a lot more engaging. I was kind of sick of printing things. And a few years after that, this guy messaged me on Instagram. So he was from SingularityNet, which is like a decentralized AI company, blockchain based. And he was like, "Oh, we've got this humanoid robot. Would you be interested in talking about doing something with us?" And I looked, and this is maybe 3 years ago. 2.5 years ago. And I sort of immediately replied and I was like, yes, I am interested. this sounds
Very new, yeah.
And it was kind of the perfect thing because it was funded by these sort of weird, decentralized, utopian, hippie, crypto people who'd been in that space for a long time, like 20 years, working on artificial general intelligence. And I just saw all of this stuff and it had this really interesting effect of it looked on the surface scanny, and the more I dug into it, the more interesting it became. And that's like the opposite of most stuff. Most stuff looks flashy on the outside and then you unpick it and there's nothing underneath. But this is the direct opposite. And he basically had a humanoid robot that had been developed as a care robot during the pandemic to look after people in care homes. And they'd been sticking a purple wig on it and doing jazz improv. And this guy, Edwin, who's now the CEO of Yaya Labs, he saw an opportunity to turn this into a cultural project. And he was like, look, what if we got Ben involved, with my connections? Because I'd also done a music video for the 1975 with a robot called Ida. And the interesting thing about all these humanoid robots is that it's a very small world. They all know each other and they're all kind of competitive and kind of hate each other in various ways. So Ida was made by the Amica people. Amica hate, all of I'm not going to go into politics, but it's
EastEnders for crypto in it. Yeah, I've seen a bit of it. Yeah.
Robots, whatever. And then I kind of pondered on it for about half a year with my agency. I was like, is this a good idea or not? And eventually we were like, okay, if you just pay me a lot of money, I'll do it. And they were offering me crypto. And I was like, no, I don't want crypto. I've had my fingers burnt before. Just give me fiat cash. They would have given me a big old chunk of crypto. And of course, what happened a year later is it went up like 20x.
So, getting paid in like fart coin or something. Yeah.
But anyway, we basically built a company around this humanoid robot and turning it into an AI celebrity. And off the back of doing that, loads of other ideas came up. So the first thing that really came to mind was like, how do you make a personality? And I got this kind of schematic, like technical schematic of physically how they make a robot personality. And then we were just like, okay, let's build a company around this. So rather than just making a celebrity career for a robot or an AI, let's build a company around doing a creative studio for AI and robotics. Basically, that is the most interesting area at the moment. Like the fashion world, the music world, the whatever, photography world, nothing's doing anything that interesting at the moment. But the AI, tech, robotics, crypto world, that's where all the cutting edge creativity is. But it looks like absolute dog shit. And that's like a big opportunity for me because I have some sort of aesthetic taste. So if you go into that world, being able to understand culture, aesthetics, beauty, and tech, there are very few people sort of straddling that. So that's how Yaya Labs came about, basically.
What is it that you do then to try and essentially give this robot some kind of like personality, soul, really, in a way, right?
Well,
not to get all like, the soul and the AI, but if you have a personality, you have a soul, I think.
No, that's where it went. And I'm quite a believer that, AI is basically this kind of I'm not going to get too woo, but it is an amalgamation of all human everything into this kind of, it's like sigils etched in sand in these kind of gigantic mystical server warehouse. Like, I'm more of that way of thinking. Do you know what I mean? It is quite mystical.
No, it is. Yeah.
And then Shauna, my partner, kind of came on board with the robot as its stylist. And we were traveling all over the world, basically doing crypto events and tech events. And she came up with this idea of the robot being this sort of spiritual computer embodiment thing. And the personality stuff, my opinion is that everything has a personality, like anything that moves. So like a Roomba, it's a very basic robot, but it does have a personality. And then we went into all sorts of psychology theories and esoteric theories and whatever else. And eventually we kind of settled on this schematic, which, you can flash up on screen maybe, but it was basically a robotic personality protocol that takes things like memory, vision, sensory inputs. The amazing thing about robots and AIs is that you can put loads of interesting sensory inputs in. So like you can give them geolocation, you can give them LiDAR, you can give them whatever. And we had this opportunity to just literally implement those kind of sensors into the robot and see what happens. First thing we did was we did this United Nations press conference for robots, and it was like the most deranged thing I've ever seen. Like 11 humanoid robots, all of the world's press in Geneva, Reuters, BBC, Al Jazeera, everyone. And this is like 2 years ago. The robots couldn't tell who was talking. Their response times were like 5 to 9 seconds. They were all like talking over each other. And of course, the journalists were asking like, are you going to take everyone's jobs? Are you going to kill everyone? Whatever. And then all of these fucking robots were just talking absolute nonsense over each other. And from that point, we were like, okay, let's tighten up the response times, install vision system, install endpoint detection, install memory, hierarchical memory, like face detection, all of these other things. And then the personality sort of grew out of prompts and memories and recursive prompts and all of that kind of stuff. But it's such an enormous subject that any experimentation is interesting.
Yeah, it's brand new as well, I guess, in that sense. I mean, I know it's been going on for a while, but like we made the jump from like Roombas, to like a robot that you can basically like give it a personality. What's your robot called?
The robot, well, we actually are not working with this robot anymore.
Okay.
The license ran out.
Been fired.
we have been fired as a robot. Robot is called Desdemona. We didn't name it, and it came to us with a purple wig and the name Desdemona as a kind of white woman robot. Which, and I quite like the challenge of having this, like, if we were to design a robot, it would not be called Desdemona, have purple hair, be a white woman, or, whatever. But it was quite nice to have that as a challenge. And we actually had 3 of them. And then we're now trying to build our own because we are no longer working with Desdemona for licensing reasons. They're a bit like Disney. All these robot makers, they all craft their robots on like dead relatives or people they loved. So they care about them a lot and they're really protective of their IP. And I just can't take anything that seriously. Do you know what I mean? So it becomes a bit incompatible. And what we've landed on is we're just going to make our own next generation robot.
They do look like they're still at that stage as well where it's almost like an ornament. Do you know what I mean? Like it's in the corner and you're like, what's that kind of thing? But are you trying to make it so, like, what's the end goal? Is it just for experimentation because it's fun, because it's interesting, or is there like an end goal, like, so someone can have a companion, or or like Elon Musk that thinks he can, like, it's going to help with like construction or whatever? Like, is there like an end purpose to it?
For us, definitely not. We tried for about 1.5 years to do the whole VC thing and like take it seriously and build software as a service things and like talk about industrial robotics. And I just don't fucking care. I don't care. It's not for me. I can't take anything that seriously. And we landed on, like, we have a bunch of much more interesting ideas which we're doing. So we're not looking to industrially produce robots, but we are releasing a blockchain-based trauma index. And like, I wrote a story for WeTransfer about 3 years ago, which was about basically Getty images for trauma. So if you're an AI therapist, how do you get a more rounded personality? And I had this idea of, like, you could license out your trauma history to an AI therapist. And then we were like, well, why don't we just actually do it? Like, just do this human experience index. And we're going to do that. You can basically mint your experiences. People can use those to drive AIs. But then we're taking all of those and building this kind of chaotic mega entity that's like everybody's amalgamated trauma history, and everybody who puts into it is funding it. So do you know what I mean? So it's this like ball of trauma.
I read there's one called something Cloud or something like that. I remember read it. It was like Black Mirror if it was good still. You know what I mean? Like I liked it.
Yeah, it was Cloudburst.
Cloudburst.
That was the WeTransfer thing. And it was, I was hyper aware of like, this is the area I'm interested in. How do I not be? I've never watched Black Mirror. I like Charlie Brooker a lot. I used to read TV Go Home. It was hilarious. But I consciously never watched Black Mirror because I didn't want to be influenced by it. And I was like, how can I do something that's different to something I've never watched? And I was just like, I'll try and just be more nuanced. I don't know. Maybe it is just Black Mirror 2, whatever. But
well, I mean, the phrase it means basically scary future now. You know what I mean? It used to be. I used to like the original like 1 or 2 series. Now it's like hee ha ha. Like you know, it's just Netflix now.
Yeah.
You know, it's dead. But I really like what you were saying. I know it is like I have the like reaction to be like, oh, I know it's a bit woo, but actually, like, I'm really interested in the kind of esoteric side to the technology, like you were saying. Like, what do you have any like theories on that, or like, where do you think that's going? Because I'm seeing it more and more. Like, okay, it's often extreme, like Zizians or whatever, but like this is growing rapidly. If you keep an eye on it, there are people that are looking at things, even as basic as the 4chan thing, where they're like, oh, the sigils are in the circuit board.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe that was a joke, but kind of the purpose of a sigil, whether you believe it or not, is kind of what the circuit board does, right? It's like we almost made it real, if that makes sense, you know? I don't know, well, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's going to be like a big focus in the future? Like, not to be all Nick Land, but you know.
I think if you reframe everything that's going on with technology, just literally take everything that's going on and reframe it as a kind of, you know, Dune-style spiritual science fiction thing, you don't have to change anything for it to be this completely insane kind of new religion, but we're just not seeing it for what it is. And I think that I made a documentary called Artificial Intimacy, which was about people having relationships with AIs. And that was only 2 years ago. And it's already like, it's going to be a very big thing. So I think that most people, we're in a very secular moment in history. I think most people are seeing it through a secular lens, but it is deeply spiritual. You know, you cannot, if you're having relationships with technology on a fundamental level, you cannot avoid that being some form of spirituality. I think people kind of I would say having worked in the crypto world for the last couple of years, there's some very cultish behavior. And I think that it's kind of, the way I like to see it is in a traditional cult, people would be kind of giving all of their money to a charismatic leader. In the crypto world, people are still giving their money to a charismatic leader, but they're getting a financial return on it because it's got this wrapper of capitalism.
It's business.
Yeah, it's business, but it's in no way different to any traditional cult. You know, they're all based around a charismatic personality or little group of people. And I think that all of these things, like, you know, crypto cults, like, you know, spiritual relationships with computing, all of these things, they're all happening. But because we're so secular, we're not seeing how spiritual it is, basically. I don't think there's that many people out there kind of worshipping circuit boards in a kind of direct way. But, you know, we are. It's like integrating into us.
Yeah, I remember someone saying that, like, you know, we're already a cyborg now. And I was like, oh, yeah, whatever. And then I just thought about it, like, I can't go anywhere without Google Maps. You know, like, it's true. It's right there. The AI, though, within the art is interesting. I think you're the first person I ever saw do it. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I like it. And then what AI in art now is, like, horror show often, because it's just like, look, I'm in you know, anime or whatever. Like, what's your kind of thoughts on the AI and art and how it should and shouldn't be used, maybe?
Yeah, totally. I think it's the same as, my view of it is it's the same as literally any art, is that, you know, the vast majority of any art is shit. You know, and I think AI is a tool, and the very first things we were doing, I think because I've been using it since early days of when generative AI was a thing, I've always seen it as just a tool in the creative person's toolkit. So like 1975, we were training GPT-2 on Zen Buddhism sayings and then using it to generate these little totemic sayings for a kind of artificial spiritual detox, digital detox that we created. And it's like, it was a means to an end. And like the reason why it worked is because those sayings were always very slightly off because the AI was bad. And then we were training generative AI on things like moss and meat and coral and drawing faces. And they were really beautiful kind of by accident. But it's like, the driver of that was beauty, not using AI to make a picture. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, this is an interesting new tool that creates an interesting aesthetic. And I think there are so many people doing really fascinating stuff with AI now, but they would be doing fascinating stuff with a cine camera or a bit of charcoal or whatever. They're just interesting people. You see what I mean? So I just think it's probably the same as anything else. The thing that's fascinating now is how superpowered it is. So, the financial barriers to creativity have gone down to the point where like they almost don't exist. If you wanted to make a film, like a feature film 20 years ago, you needed a lot of money. And it's getting to the point very soon where you will need almost nothing, like a Sora subscription, you know what I mean, and an imagination. And for me, that's good. But it does mean that there's a huge amount of slop out there. Is that any worse than having a huge amount of shit watercolors? I don't know.
It's a really good point, and I was very anti it. I was like, no, we even have a logo on away days, no generative AI was using this, and I still am in terms of that. But in art, I came to realize from a different kind of what you were saying, the fact that someone from a very poor background can make something incredible with very little now. And I'm like, well, isn't that kind of a really artistic thing in itself? And me and Sam Black, we were and Spice Bag as well, we're working on this kind of project where we want to do a multimedia kind of journalism project, but it's fiction about a modern day British Civil War. And so we're doing fake articles, we're doing this. And then Sam just sent me this clip, and it's just this drone shot, 4 lads on a burned down, very obviously British estate, England flags, and they're holding, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm sold. This is incredible. Now, I would never use it in a doc, in a way to generate something that wasn't there. But when it's art, it's wow, it's fascinating. Do you ever think there's a limit though, where it's it's no longer your own creation anymore, or does it matter?
I think there's a misconception that creating stuff with AI is easy. I think there's a misconception that, you just go and type the thing in and it makes the thing. And my experience is that to do something well is difficult and skilled still. So, when we do AI-based projects, I will have the same size team that I had when we were doing traditional photography or filmmaking projects, but they just have different roles. So we have server managers and prompt engineers and coders and whatever else. And it's the same size team. The people are just as creative, but doing a different thing. And I think that that example that you said, yeah, as long as people know this is a speculative fiction and it's been created with this cutting edge technology, amazing as far as I'm concerned. If it's engaging and interesting, I literally couldn't give a fuck how it's made. Do you know what I mean? But the thing is that there's this account out there called, I think it's called Azerbaijani Technologies. I can't remember the guy who does it, but it's a t-shirt company. And he posts this film every couple of days, and it'll be it's tough being a cat boy in Serbia. And it'll be a day in the life of a cat boy in Serbia. And they're so funny. And it's man, why would you not do that? Why would you not do something that's cool and funny and entertaining? But I think it's, this creativity is Darwinistic, and ultimately, there's only a finite amount of attention span, money, and people in the world looking at stuff. So, the good stuff will rise to the top, and the shit will, go away. So.
Talking about the shit AI stuff rising to the top, you're the first, and to be honest, the only person I've seen sharing the stuff that regimes are making. For example, Israel.
Yeah.
Is making just some crazy stuff. Maybe you can just go into that a little bit, because I don't think people are aware how it's being used and how it's basically tricking people out there.
Yeah, I mean, the examples that I've used with the sort of Israel-Gaza conflict, for a start, both sides are using generative AI on in huge quantities to just make fake images. And I don't want to sort of be too specific about who's doing what, but everybody's at it. Mm. And mostly, I think, to get political for a minute, if there's any conflict, you'll always get opportunists, right? So the opportunism that's happening, for example, on the Gaza side, is that people are making generative AI images of atrocities that don't exist, using that to generate content and get likes, clicks, shares, raise money for charities, whatever else. And I've been I've been out there being just don't do that. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of you don't need to create these.
There's enough real atrocity.
Absolutely plenty of genuine atrocity. And it just creates skepticism. Do you know what I mean? As soon as I see some fake shit, I'll be I don't really trust the rest of it. And then I posted Israel put out this thing the other day. It was the Israeli marketing board or something. And they've got this campaign called Buy Blue and White. And it's a black Israeli woman basically talking about things like orange juice and whatever. Orange juice, cheese, something else. And as she's singing about orange juice, it turns into a missile, and the cheese turns into a tank, and the something else turns into something else. It's it's really naff, but it would have cost them almost nothing to make it. Do you see what I mean? So I think there's the field of just kind of generating misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, whatever. And then there's the field of generating propaganda really quickly. And I think like I think it was Myanmar rebel group posted this thing about drone warfare the other day. It was Michael Jackson based thing trolling the regime. And like everybody's going to do it, because if you're fighting some war somewhere with no money, you're not going to get a fucking film crew out. Do you know what I mean? Just use generative AI and make some funny propaganda, which again, fine, you know.
Yeah, you use what's at your hands. What about every time I read about AI sentience, I send it to you and you're like, bullshit. Like, and I'm like, 10 days later, I'm like, yeah, it turns out it was. What do you think about it? Do you think it's possible? Have you seen anything?
It depends what you, right, this is such a, I think there's no consensus on what consciousness is, and there's no real consensus on what sentience is. But to my mind, where I landed after 2 years of working with a lot, and you know, the amazing thing about what we were doing with the IR Labs initially is that we were getting flown around the world and being like right with the most cutting edge, intelligent people that you could possibly imagine, and hearing what they think and what they predict. And generally what they say is what's going to happen in like 10 years, which is fascinating. But there's no consensus on that stuff. The consensus, what I arrived at is that whatever you think about agentic AI, wherever that's going, giving something intention, agency, and a bank balance, you know, that is when you'll start to see genuine things happen. And then it's like, I actually, when I started doing Yo-Yo Labs, I had 2 months of, I'm not an insomniac, like I sleep really easily because I've got a clear conscience, because I never do anything wrong. But like,
Yeah, me neither.
I had like 2 months of like real like death fear thing, because I'd been deconstructing personality. I was like, fuck, we're just meat robots. Oh my God. And it was really horrifying. And the thing that sort of stopped me with that was pulling back to the sort of spirituality stuff. Like, I believe in God, you know, I believe in sort of beauty of nature and whatever else. So it's like, if either this is all part of that, or all of the beauty of nature, God's spirituality stuff is bullshit and it's all just technical, which I don't believe. So that's kind of what saved me. But I think with the sentience thing, it's like, if something has agency, an intention, a goal, and the means to do it, then it will appear sentient. And like, the thing that I've found fascinating is I speak to people all day, as do you, I'm sure, all over the world on Instagram. Now, I have no idea whether they're real or not. You know what I mean? I just don't know. And that is, you know, we're way beyond Turing test stuff. Like, ultimately, if I can be talking to somebody and I don't know if they're real or not, we're there, you know?
Yeah. Yesterday, I did the feature on ChatGPT where you like, you know, you just talk to it. Normally, I didn't even know you could do it until recently. I was like, hey, like, what's the weather going to be like? And just the way he delivered it, I was like, nice lad, like thinking, I was like, what the fuck? Like, that is, you know, that's like Microsoft Sam, but it's not anymore, you know. It's fascinating to me. And it's like, I've seen this thing, there was an article in Wired recently, I don't know if you saw it, where people are, there's a new kind of mental disorder. I mean, it's probably linked to an existing one, but they're considering it a new mental disorder where people that were otherwise sane are going crazy from ChatGPT, and they're using it in a way where it starts reaffirming things. Have you seen this? Like, what do you think about that? I was like, you got to be an idiot to fall for that. But then when I read it, I was like, well, I mean, I'm probably an idiot as well. You know what I mean?
I think it's, you know, I think as with anything like that, I think you have to exercise a high degree of caution. The other big issue is just people becoming significantly more stupid. And like, you know, I work with, you know, people who need to write and understand things all the time. And you can very clearly see the people who are not reading anymore and not writing anymore becoming almost immediately more stupid. And then if you say like, can you write, you know, just write this thing, they're like, they cannot write anymore. They don't read anything. And they are, you know, I think if you combine that, I think if you use it as like a really superpowered assistant, research assistant kind of thing, it's great. As soon as you start using it as a genuine kind of companion or shortcut to thinking, it's a very rapid downward spiral. You know? So I think if you, I mean, when I was doing that AI, you know, intimacy, relationships, documentary thing, you know, they are having relationships with quite rudimentary chatbots, but they're making a decision to sort of outsource their intimacy to something like that. Like, it's a conscious choice. Do you know what I mean? The thing.
I think it's loneliness, maybe.
I think it's loneliness, in their instances, loneliness, anxiety, kind of curiosity. I think the people who were just curious didn't seem to get into much trouble. It's the people who had sort of curiosity mixed with other vulnerabilities. And that's where you've got to be careful. I haven't met many sort of really sensible people who have come a cropper with that stuff.
Yeah, that is true, you know, and I've tried to get it to do all sorts of crazy stuff, you know, never once I've been like, wow, like, you know what I mean? It seems obvious, but then there are people that like, you know, like I had a family member the other day was telling me like to, you know, check out Graham Hancock, who's like super interesting, but it's like, it's quite easy to kind of dispel, do you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm not like against it or anything. I think, you know, who knows what actually happened. But you know, when like someone you know that was otherwise completely against it, well, it's on Netflix. I'm like, wow, that well, if it's on Netflix, it's got to be real or it's got to be true, you know. And it's like, that is the worry I have. But I don't know. I think in the future as well, like you were saying, people can't read, they can't do anything. I think concentration will be currency. Like, I think people will probably literally have to be like, you need to do a concentration test. Like, can you do stuff like this? Because there's got to be a serious, like, overall problem when this hits, like, the boom, the Zoomers or whatever.
Yeah.
When they get to the point where they're ruling the country, like, how? Like, I don't know. I see this, like, pure crisis, and maybe I'm being dramatic.
Well, that's the moment at which everything's going to start getting outsourced to AI. You know, I think we're getting to the point very soon where it's like, would I rather have a board of councillors running this town or a good large language model? Probably it'll make more sensible decisions. And I think
would be my town, yeah.
that's the pathway to it. Do you know what I mean? People of my generation would be mortified by that. But like, you know, I work with a couple of people who I love very much. But the other day I was like, have you guys read this like very long thing that I wrote and spent like 2 days writing? And they're like, yeah, we've read it. I was like, okay, so what did I say about that? And they're like, okay, we haven't read it. I was like, just sit there and fucking read it for 15 minutes. And they like could not read it. Do you know what I mean? I was like, is this... And neither of them are stupid at all. And neither of them have ADHD or whatever. They're just like, they're so used to just kind of dumping it into ChatGPT and saying, summarize this into bullet points.
Do people do that?
Oh yeah, especially in the tech world and like the business world.
Really?
And there's like, I guess if you have to say you work in venture capital and you need to read like loads of really, really thick reports about stuff, there is an advantage to saying like, okay, take this PDF and digest it into like 2 pages, executive summary, bottom line up front, bullet points, whatever. That's fine. But only if you are using that to multiply the amount of work that you can do rather than reduce the amount of work you do to a small percentage and become fucking stupid.
It gets a lot wrong as well, like even when it's mixing stuff up.
Yeah, and that's, I think it's, the other thing I have to say is like we're at like day zero of technology, you know, and I think I've talked about this stuff online, like I called it techno-blaseism. I was trying to think of some sort of term for it, but people like, they'll see AI make an almost perfect piece of cinematic film and be like, oh, it's not quite perfect. Like that finger's a bit wrong. It's like, man, it's so fucking mind-blowing. And you're like, oh, the finger's a bit wrong. And it's the same with, I think, large language model stuff is like, it is absolutely incredibly powerful. And we're at the very beginning. So like, imagine in 5 years, it's going to be like, you know.
Yeah, it went from, I remember the first time I used it when it could generate images, I asked it to put the lures in a strip club.
Yeah.
Weird, I don't know, whatever. And it looked like a bad water painting. Now you could have a movie of that if you wanted, you know what I mean? It's crazy, it scares me. Moving away from AI, I want to talk about Ditto Nation. So you've not made documentaries for a while, but the ones you did, like I was involved with them a little bit, super interesting, always kind of cutting edge stuff. Maybe tell us like, what is Ditto Nation? What was the inspiration for it? Why did you want to go and branch out and do that yourself?
Yeah, so Ditto Nation was kind of it was like an in-joke that started during the pandemic. I started a Discord server quite a few years ago, and so I was trying to think of names for it, and somebody was like, you know, I did my thing of posting on my Instagram story, ideas for names, and somebody was like, Ditto Nation, like decimation. Okay, that's funny. And it was just like an in-joke on Discord, probably had like 1,000 members. And then when the clubs opened after the pandemic, I went to unfold, and some random guy came up to me and was like, Ditto Nation, proud member. I was like, oh, fuck, this is like, it's gone from being a joke on Discord out into the real world. And like that started happening a fair bit. I was like, okay, this can be like a kind of pseudo cult kind of thing. And then with the documentaries, I was like, I wanted to kind of crystallize the stuff that I talk about with my community into something that had some sort of archival quality, because, you know, Discord servers get deleted, Telegram channels go, Instagram, whatever. But I think like filmmaking, I think filmmaking, sculpture, you know, novels, albums, those are still the kind of enduring art forms.
It will never die, I'm certain.
Pretty much, I think we're safe for a while. Like those are the sort of respectable things that are going to be around for, you know, in an archival way. And I was like, I just want to make something enduring. And yeah, I've got this huge list of documentaries I want to make. And then there's the realities of like, I made one with you about 3D printed firearm, like the effects of that on culture. I made one with Shuman Basar just about like a sense of identity within technology, one about mental health discourse, which I find fascinating, and one about AI relationships. And then I've got a list of like 20 more. But as you know, the realities of life are like, if I could just sit around doing this stuff all day, I would absolutely fucking love that. But I need to earn money and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, the intention wasn't to stop. What really happened is I released one, started Yo-Yo Labs, got fully into that, and then haven't really taken. Also, I had an amazing editor who's no longer able to do that stuff. And as you know, like having a good relationship with those people is hard. Finding people who really get it is hard. There's a lot of like editors who would do like an okay job, but finding somebody who like absolutely understands you in every way is like,
it's incredible. You learn it through filmmaking. I think it's incredible how much difference like one or two people can make to a project. Like it's everything, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's fascinating. What one, if you say someone said, here's a load of budget, what one would you make like next?
The next one that I've been really wanting to do for a while is about network state stuff. So people like Urbit and, you know, Balaji and all of those people. And I think that I've been talking to people about that for years now. And
sorry to cut you in. I still don't understand what it is exactly. I had a look and I was like, nah.
It's basically crypto statehood. So it's this kind of arch like techno-libertarian concept. And there's, you know, as with anything, there's like the EAC version and then the sort of more dystopian version. And it's people who are creating states on crypto decentralized ethoses. So, you know, DAO run, you know, one token, one vote kind of voting rights, all of that stuff. And of course, the types of people that appeals to, you know, the types of people like Curtis Yarvin adjacent, sort of, you know, Peter Thiel, all of that.
Yeah.
I think there's also a kind of, there's a more left libertarian side of it. And it exists within the sort of Kurdish, you know, some of the aspects of
Amir, for example.
All of that kind of thing. And that I would absolutely love to do. But that, you know, I had plans to like go and visit some Kurdistan, you know, go and visit Rojava and like talk about all of this stuff. But then it just becomes another thing of like time, money, blah, blah, blah. That I actually filmed one. I got friendly with some people from MMC, Maniacs Murder Club. And I did, you know, as you know, those people are very, very difficult to speak to. And I spoke to a few of them and I recorded it. And it's like, it made me feel extremely icky doing it, because they were like, some of them were like fine to talk to, but it was very adjacent to sort of 764 stuff. And I was having these conversations with these, you know, it's a brutal subculture. Like there's no two ways about it. And what they were doing was brutal, but it wasn't pedophilia kind of brutal. It was like
violence,
stabbing homeless people kind of brutal. And like, I can just about stomach that. I can't stomach the other stuff. So like, you know, when you're like, any minute now, I'm going to start talking to somebody who's like tipping over into that area. So I've got a bunch of interviews and a load of interesting footage from them, which I was going to make into a documentary and put it on like, what's that platform that you can put anything on?
Rumble.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But that's like, again, I just need an editor.
Yeah, them like, it's like, I know what you mean. It's like, okay, I don't get it. Like, to me, like, you know, you stab a homeless person, like, I think you should be like melted in acid. Yeah. But like, I can understand how someone is just a fucked up weird. But the other stuff, it's like children and like dark. Yeah, even in our research with it, there was a point where I was like, we have like a small team, and I was like, lads, I can't. Like, you know, like, it's made me. Me and two friends right now actually, we're trying to work out a way to bring it into schools to explain, because we realized the US government is actually taking it serious, but. For anyone that's not aware, it's just what I call like sadistic extortion, basically. It's like getting children to harm themselves, paedophilic, just awful, awful stuff. And the British government, as usual, not really understanding it, even though England is the second biggest place for it, probably. But we're trying to bring it into schools. And through that, a friend of mine, great lad, was unaware of it. And then when I told him about it, we started we made like a one-pager to understand for teachers. And even though they didn't know what it was at the time, every single one has gone, actually, yeah, I've seen something like this. And it's whether it's gore coming into schools, but through a very, kids obsessed with it at very young ages. It's unlike anything I think we've ever seen. I mean, when I was in school, we only just had mobile phones, you know what I mean? Only in the last few years. That to me, I think, I don't know, have you seen the age drop? For me, I don't know if I'm just thinking it or what, but because, I was doing mad stuff at a young age. But when I look at it, it's it seems to be that the savviness and the brutality is just getting younger and younger online.
Well, all the MMC stuff that I was seeing, they were all probably 20s. Do you know what I mean? I think within the other stuff, I've got a sort of natural instinct to just get the fuck away from anything that's too adjacent to that. So I think on the kind of gore, obviously, I'm kind of part of some kind of gore, extremism community. But within that, I think you get these immediate red flags, and anything where there's any younger people at all, I'm like,
Yeah.
But I think it's, when I was at school, there was no World Wide Web. Then when I was at university, there was rotten.com, and there is this sort of natural progression of curiosity. But the other con stuff and, 764, it's something much, much darker. And I think it's probably a reaction to, it's a reaction to what's going on with gender discourse, discussion about, what it means to be a man, or no discussion about what it means to be a man. And all of these other very, very dissociating, very, unsettling things that are happening. This is not to excuse it.
No.
But I think that there is zero good role modeling for men, for young men, zero. Not a little, there's fucking none. So if this stuff will appeal to a certain demographic, and now it's absolutely super bad. My route into understanding it all was somebody tried to recruit me into Atomwaffen when I used to run this 2014 black metal kind of. I run fake accounts so that I can keep an eye on stuff, and it was when when Ukraine stuff was happening, and I was running a fake Ukraine black metal thing so I could see what was going on with paramilitaries, and some very fucking obvious Fed tried to recruit me into Atomwaffen in 2016. And at that point, I started to sort of, Telegram, Atomwaffen, NMC, 764, all of this stuff, which you're really great with all of that kind of thing. But I just started to see this red line. My red line was more on the kind of extremist kind of gore Satanism level. And then there's another level of it, which is the sort of sex extortion, paedophilia kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? They kind of run in parallel.
They do,
and sometimes they cross over. One of the MMC lads I was talking to, he was really like, oh yeah, I hate, whatever, coloured people. I hate paedophiles. I was like, yeah, but you're this guy that you associate with is part of 764 and blah, blah. And he was like, they just find it very confusing, and there's no logic to these people at all.
No, no, I think they try and dress it up, but really, they just want to do nasty things to people. Do you know what I mean? And I think that even will be more honest. It's all the graphics, all the ideology, all the name. It's you just want to be horrible. And I think these people have always existed. Now, the internet gives them the worst. I feel the worst place. At least back in the day, they would have been getting a spear in the head or something on some random battlefield, or the one throwing it. Now it's it's just also, it's always the people that outside anyone would knock their head off, but in this world they're powerful, they become a king. It's in their world, it's fucked up. It's interesting what you said though about the male role model stuff. There's a few I do think, randomly, I don't know if you see this guy, DJ AG. He's the guy that's doing the sets at King's Cross, and everybody comes down. He's just the nicest guy, a very good guy. You can tell he's been raised well. He does, even though he's a very big platform now, he'll have very big artists on there, but he'll also still go to the care home and have the ladies in there, or he'll let some kid that's autistic that can't rap, and he'll put everything out, no problem, great guy. But again, it's he's not trying to be the role model, he's just a good guy, and it's for me, when I especially at our Thai boxing, some of the young lads talking about Andrew Tate, and when I first saw that, I thought it was hilarious. I was this is not in a good way. I was this guy's a moron. This is, no one's going to take this seriously. Lo and behold, it's grown massively, which to me, I was like, I don't understand it anymore. Like this, like Andrew Tate, he's walking around with his shirt off, he's smoking big cigars, like he drives a Bugatti, like the ugliest car in the world. He's just a moron, you know, like he's very clearly very stupid idiot, and I don't actually think he believes in anything, you know what I mean? Apart from the fact he's allegedly a rapist and all this other stuff, like fucking horrible. But it's worked, you know what I mean? What do you think, why do you think that is? And do you see any, like, way to change it? Like, do you think there is a way to change it from like 0 to 1%? It's a big question, I know, but it's a serious issue now, I think.
Well, something I'd say about Andrew Tate, and like, I know this is very, very basic shit, but it's a bit like Trump, is that they are funny. Like, Andrew Tate can be funny. Trump is fucking funny.
Trump's funny, man. Yeah.
And I think when, you know, the thing that the left, liberals, whatever, the mistake that they make is to underestimate the power of that stuff. And like, Kamala Harris is not funny. Do you know what I mean? Worthiness is not funny, whatever. But there's some video of Andrew Tate and his mates like scooting around their fucking mansion and talking about bees and just being weird. It's like, there is a real power and currency in that stuff that people, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's operating below what they say, is that they're actually engaging and they make engaging content and they can be funny and whatever else. And I think that like, I don't know what young men need. I have got no idea, but I know that they definitely do not, what they definitely do not need more of. And I think it is I would say it's definitely a reaction to, you know, this discourse on like men are awful, you know, and, you know, there's the Me Too movement, which was ostensibly a good thing. And, you know, because the workplace used to be horrific for women. But there's been no kind of, and I'm saying some fucking obvious stuff, do you know what I mean? But I think that I can understand why young men would be confused. And something I've been looking at recently is this huge growth in like 17-year-olds on enormous amounts of steroids. Like people are fucking huge. Like,
where I live, all the six, I'm in the gym and they're like lifting double. I'm like,
yeah, they're like bench pressing fucking 250 kilos, and they're like this size.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this is like it's like a kind of very visible metaphor for what's happening to masculinity. Do you know what I mean? It's like this artificial, pumped up kind of hyper masculine reaction to the feminization that people have been demanding because of the way that men have behaved and not blah, blah, blah. Like when I was younger, nobody ever spoke. It's interesting, like with the Me Too movement, nobody ever spoke about what was okay and what wasn't okay. But it would be an absolute lie to say that people didn't know what was right and wrong. Like, you know, it's not right to grope a woman in the workplace.
They just did it anyway.
They just fucking did it anyway. There's this lie that like, oh, you know, we didn't know that. Everybody's always known what's right and wrong. But I think that, you know, we have basically identified a problem, but not given anything at all appealing to replace it with, other than Andrew Tate, Conor McGregor, fucking whatever else. Or just pretending it like gender transition. Do you know what I mean? It's either that or I'm not a man anymore.
Yeah.
Like there has to be some middle ground. I think I'm painting with very broad strokes, and actually I speak to like a lot of very sensible young men online for sure.
I agree. I think like there's a lot of like really sensible young lads out there, and you just don't hear about it because why would you? It's like, yeah, he's a sensible young lad. But I also agree as well that like, there's this thing of, you know, just anything you want to be that came naturally within you because of thousands and thousands of years of, you know, the way everything has been is now not good, you know. And it's good when we need you to go to Iraq and die. That's great.
Yeah.
But when you come home, no, you know. It's like when you see hooliganism, right? Every war, almost every war, hooligans are straight on the front line, you know, heroes. But when they're, you know, okay, out on the street, I get it. But even if they're in the forest fighting, no, you can't do that. But if we need you to die for us, but then please shut the fuck up. And it's like, I think we got to the point where people are like, almost clocking it without clocking it. And we're like, hang on, like, why should I? You know what I mean? And unfortunately, like you say, it comes out in these like over the top, like amateur dramatic with like pumped out of their mind on steroids. You know what I mean? And it's really worrying, man, because I see it a lot. You know, I still go to the same Thai boxing gym that I started at when I was 14. And like all my guys, like very close, like super nice guys. In our gym, we don't even have like women's class because we don't have men's class. Everybody trains together. If you don't like it, you can't train at our place. And even then, like you can kind of hear things that we wouldn't have dreamed of saying back in the day. And it's like, why has it suddenly become okay again? You know, it kind of went 360. It's like the idea now that to be a man is either like X or like Y. It's just like not chromosomes. But you know what I mean? It's put into 2 boxes, and it's like, I don't know anyone that's that basic.
No.
You know, like I really don't. Like I remember the first thing I ever saw you do, actually, this is a random one, but you were doing like the way that the US people, like it's Tuesday, innit? You know, you had a video like this. I was like, oh, this guy's funny. And then when I went on the profile, I was like, I would never think that guy was doing this. But then it's like, why wouldn't you? Like, you know, but the internet has made you think everybody is like this box or that box, you know? I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's almost like ruining the idea that there's like nuance to just people, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that's an important one for me with gender, for example, because I'm, you know, when I was a teenager, I was a massive goth. I used to wear makeup and dresses and like all sorts of stuff. And in those, you know, this was in the 90s, and there was no discourse around anything about gender fluidity or whatever. It was just like, we were just fucking around. It was fine. Like just, you know, dressing up and going out and having a good time, being club kids, whatever else. Now that would be framed in a very different way. But I think that, you know, people have lost this, like all men have feminine aspects and all women have masculine aspects. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think instead of people just being encouraged, like, just go and play with that. Do you know what I mean? If you want to paint your fingernails and wear a dress and, you know, just fucking play around with it and have a good time. It doesn't have to mean anything fixed. Do you know what I mean? And then there are other cultures in the world, like, you know, Middle Eastern and Far Eastern cultures where that sort of stuff is much more part of society and it's not viewed as anything major. But I think we're just, you know, Britain, colonial Britain was very, very like, a man is this,
Yeah.
you know, and a woman is this. And yeah, like, and that applies to everything. It applies to politics and belief systems and whatever else. So you don't have to just be one thing. The Americans are the worst for it because of their, you know, that like if you are a Republican, you de facto have to be pro-gun, anti-abortion, blah, blah, blah. We're not so bad with that stuff in the UK, which is good. You know, you can be, you know, a conservative who's, you know, very pro-abortion and anti-gun for sure. That's absolutely fine. But I think that, you know, that kind of thinking of like, if you want to identify as this kind of thing, I'm not even sure how many people really want to be like that anymore.
Yeah, I think that has passed a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I do notice people like kind of just being like, I don't know, I just like this. You know, I feel like a lot of the power, which is good. I don't like I'm very much on your level of like, even if I don't like something, within reason, it should be allowed. You know, it shouldn't be, I don't like it, but that doesn't mean it should be stopped, you know.
Except for betting.
Except for betting, yeah, no betting. Yeah, yeah, fuck gambling. Or at least not on my estate.
Just we were talking earlier about like before we started recording about how I'm very libertarian about everything, but I become a massive authoritarian.
Yeah, no, definitely. No Ladbrokes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Next week I'll be like sponsored by but no, definitely not. But like still I notice people people are just going like, I'm tired of that. Especially the younger gen, you know, they just want to have a laugh. It's funny what you said, like I notice like younger members of my family and stuff, they're looking on TikTok, they're just trying to have a laugh. Like 90% of what they're consuming is just, and a lot of it is funny.
Yeah.
You know, it's just pranks or like, you know, like funny comments, you know. And I do think that getting so serious on it really it's like left them people behind and they're just like, we're not interested. Like it's so boring, which in some ways is good, but in other ways it's bad because I see people just completely disengage.
Yeah.
Like they're just, you know, they'd rather not even think about politics and then just like blowhards take over.
Well, I think something very disconcerting has happened with politics in general. So firstly, I don't know if you noticed this year, but during Pride Month, it was like, you know, funding was like, I don't know the exact statistics, but it was like down 75% for some people. No corporations changed their logos to the Pride flag. And it's like, this is obviously a result of Trump and, you know, his policies. And like, it was absolutely revolting before. And, you know, whatever.
So they call it pink washing.
Yeah, cynical corporate bullshit, whatever. But I think that it's kind of, yeah, people are drifting. What I think, I'm like thinking about 3 things at the same time. What's happening in the world is so disconcerting for people in the West because generally we've spent the last few decades thinking we're generally the good guys. Like generally we get some stuff wrong, but we're generally morally the good guys. And then you see what's been happening in the world recently. You're like, oh no, absolutely not. Like we are 100% the bad guys. In this XYZ situation, we are categorically fucking evil.
Absolutely.
And like, and that is having this really, really like watching fucking Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch and whoever else standing up in Parliament talking about how some Palestinian family should be deported because they used a Ukrainian immigration law to stay here. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, everybody agreeing, consensus across the political parties that you should kick these people out who've had half their family bombed by our fucking...
Yeah, we indirectly put 250 million out there to bomb children.
Yeah, it is absolutely repulsive. And then, you know, seeing Germany and the way that they're treating protests there, it's very disconcerting for everyone. And I think that people are just like, do you know what? I don't know who to believe or trust anymore. So I'm just going to watch brain rot. Great.
That's a great point. I think that's exactly what I was trying to say. That's it. And it's like, I think... Yeah, I always had this feeling. I always use the EU as an example, right? Like, I think we should have stayed in just because it was probably easier financially. I don't give a fuck. The EU, like, the way they present themselves as a moral organisation. Now, the EU recently was just saying how great Azerbaijan is. Azerbaijan breaks every single charter of what the EU believes in. The EU itself has had to investigate their, elections because they were just bullshit. But when the gas was cut off from Russia, we love Azerbaijan. And it's like, right, if they just said, we're a business, you know, it's like, cool, fine. Yeah. But then a lot of people don't realise that. They have the EU flag in their Twitter bio. And then I think for a lot of those people, they were like, hang on, wait, do they not believe in anything? And it's like, yeah, of course they don't believe in anything. It's the same with Barclays Bank didn't have the pride flag this month. It's not because they're now homophobic. They didn't care before. You know, they'll take your house whether you're gay or straight, you know, it is what it is. And I think a lot of people are just going check out, you know, which, can you blame them?
No, I think it's also the sort of collapse of the international rule-based order. There are people talking about the ICC and their relationship to, you know, it's like people are really seeing that those were all instruments of Western hegemony. Now that, you know, some of these institutions were set up because of the treatment of Jews in World War II. And then you see Israel, absolutely, you know, terrorizing anybody who supports them, and America threatening to sanction anybody who has. And it's like, what the fuck? You fucking people sent this stuff up, and now you're, you know. So of course, and with the EU, you're right. Originally it was just about trade. It was like, if we trade with each other, we're probably not going to have a war with each other. But it sort of drifts into this neoliberal ideology and gets defined by ideologies. And at that point, it becomes hypocritical. Just stay as a trade body, then you won't be hypocritical neoliberal kind of. You know.
Yeah, it's tiring, man. I got to stop thinking about politics. Let's talk about your new archive. This is one of my favorite projects you've set up. It was, you know, you ever look at something and you're like, that was made for me, almost. You know what I mean? I was like, I love this. The Ditto Nation Archive, or whatever the name is now. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's now going to be called the Ditto National Library, because we've been bickering about what to call it for a while. But I wanted to have a resource online where you could read sort of forbidden knowledge. You know what I mean? Stuff that the first thing that came to mind was the Hamas Charter. And I don't support Hamas, but nobody's read it. Nobody has read the fucking Hamas Charter. I categorically guarantee you that nobody who talks about that war has read it. Mm-hmm. Because if they had, they would definitely have a more nuanced view of everything, or the revised edition or whatever. Again, I'm not saying this to defend Hamas in any way. I'm just saying that, you know, the core of it is we should read. We should understand what people think, you know. Then there's the Green Book and, you know, Gaddafi's thing. And lots, Osama bin Laden's letter to America after 9/11. All of these things are there was a moment on TikTok where all of these all of these Zoomers were reading bin Laden's letter to America and being like, oh, fuck. It's yeah, of course, nobody read it. Yeah. During it was run in The Observer and probably some American newspapers, but nobody fucking read it. Because if they had, they would understand the rationale for what happened. I'm not defending it at all, but I think it's very important for all of us to read and understand ideologies and what drives them. So that was the initial idea, was let's just post all of this stuff on Telegram, mirror it across other channels so it can't get deleted. And then Ed, who's the librarian there, came on board, and he's been doing an amazing job of basically finding anything that's been sort of censored, blacklisted, banned, whatever, giving it a bit of context and then making it available to read. We're, you know, treading a fine line with some of it, because I don't want to publish the Anarchist Cookbook book is the best example. You can go to prison for publishing that. So it's we're trying to sort of not go to prison, but also
it's very easy in England though.
Rule 1, not go to prison. Rule 2, educate people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's growing into a bigger project, and we're hoping to sort of set up some nodes and mirror sites and all of that kind of thing. You go on there, there's a PDF. I'm also working on an AI thing so they can get turned into podcasts because, like, frankly, who has time to read 7,000 books? You know, we're all busy. But yeah, that's the idea, is just to sort of spread this kind of, forbidden knowledge type stuff.
I really, really like it, and I agree with it because I've bumped up a lot in my career as a reporter, doing stuff, especially with war and like underground groups, and people like, why did you share that? I'm like, because if you don't read it, you won't understand where they're coming from, and you might not know how to stop it or whatever, you know. And it's now, like, even the fact where you have to say, and I do it a lot, I don't agree with this, but it's like, it's crazy you always have to do that. And it's people are just so, you've shared this. Why? You believe that? No. It's like there can be other reasons, right? And when I looked at this, I was like, yeah, this is amazing. Like, there's stuff in there that even I've struggled to find. And it's like, I needed that because this was part of my research. And sure, some nutcase might use it or want to read it, but you can't then limit information just in case, you know?
I think it really...
Apart from like explosives, because we don't want to go to prison. You can only go to prison if you do something that's like, in England, if you're like a paedophile politician, you're not going to prison. If you just do some bad stuff online, you might go to prison, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, an interesting case study for that stuff is shooter manifestos. And I remember, like, we were talking about the Telegram manifesto some time ago. Like, Telegram is a really interesting one because it fucking glows. That manifesto glows hard, but it's really interesting. You know, it's this sort of very right accelerationist thing. And like, I find it interesting. I want to be able to read that. But then shooter manifestos, I personally read them all. I find them really interesting. I'm not in any danger of shooting up a school. Is there any value in sharing them? I think that what Columbine and subsequent events has created is this kind of cookie cutter kind of mythos that you can fit into, and you can see shooter manifestos evolve. Like, they have a format and they have certain things that you need to do or can do. And I find that fascinating and I want it documented. However, it's clearly like I am perpetuating that behavior by publishing it. I basically just had to assume that my audience are not school shooters, which I think they aren't. They seem mostly pretty sensible. And I think generally, I think knowledge should be free. I think it's like, you know, the old example of this would be like Peter Sotos and, you know, and all of those kinds of things. It's like, that is really pushing the limits, pushing the limits of what's okay and what's not okay. And that's a real clear example of like, I really don't like it. Do I think it should be banned? I don't know. Like, I'm on the fence about it.
same.
Do you know what I mean? Anything that involves real people, I think, you know, when it comes to like rape and, you know, child abuse, whatever, anything that involves real people, categorically not. When it comes to fantasy stuff, it's like, I don't know, like that's where these things get tested. I would never run that in Ditto Nation Library. But I think that though it's very easy to have like moral test case stuff about nice things, but it's when it gets really, really nasty that you get really tested.
And that's when it really becomes the essence of what you're talking about, censorship or anti-censorship. And it's like, yeah, no, I agree. I think though people go too far with, like, I would say I'm anti-censorship, like very anti-censorship, always have been. But then I think some people say, well, why wouldn't you share this then if you're anti-censorship? So it was about a fucking soul. I'm like a human being. I don't want to like share something that's absolutely evil just because that's not censorship. That's like agency, right? And like putting out there what you would maybe agree. Okay, you could say, well, if you don't want to put it out there, it's censorship. Well, I don't want to put it out there. You know what I mean? It's like, or whatever. I don't think it should be out there, but I'm not making the rules and I'm not trying to stop it. But sometimes, I don't know what you think about this. Sometimes I think like, you know, you said you find the school shooter stuff very interesting. I do. And sometimes I'll almost say, well, I find it interesting because of this. And I definitely do need it for my research. I would read it anyway because I simply find it interesting. I don't think there's anything wrong with having access to stuff, even if it's grisly, simply because I think it's interesting. I don't know. Do you think we should have more responsibility?
I think that people like yourself and myself, I think that we try to cultivate a more informed audience. So I think that there's a degree of, you know, like I have a more extreme Telegram channel where I share much more violent things. And I very carefully vet the people that go in there. And generally, I think that they're people who are like similar to me. I don't think I come across many genuinely sadistic, evil people. Do you know what I mean? I have definitely come across them online, of course, like really fucking awful, like very unwell people. But I think that if I thought I was catering to that audience, I wouldn't be doing it. Do you know what I mean? I very rarely sort of have that kind of concern about the people that are in my orbit. So I think they can be trusted with forbidden knowledge. Do you know what I mean? They can be trusted with that information. I think like with the school shooter manifesto thing, it's tricky though, because also who knows who's writing this stuff? Do you know what I mean? I think that a percentage of them are definitely written by feds for sure. You can see it and are we kind of propagating? Are we like helping this kind of manufacturing of this stuff by 3-letter agencies? Maybe, I don't know, but.
It's so intertwined. You don't fucking know. If you think about that all day, you'll end up like these guys. And the kind of people think we're feds. Like that's, I see like Hanrahan and Ben, and I'm like, and I look into it, and it's basically because we have like you think, well, I like this on this, but I don't like that on that. Whereas I think people think, well, if you like this, you must like all of this. You know what I mean?
Well, a classic example of that was the Russia-Ukraine thing, in that, I have been following that conflict since 2014, and I know a lot of people there. I've been there a lot, and I understand it very well. And then being like, I can really clearly see what Russia were doing. I have to say, I think Russia their behavior is fucking appalling.
Absolutely.
Completely appalling. But compared to the behavior of Israel, it is nothing.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they're saying. But I think all of the accusations that I got because I was not pro-Russia or not massively anti-NATO, a lot of that kind of washed up when I was like, also, I am not pro-Israel. That you're sort of expected to be, if you're pro-Ukraine, you'll be pro-Israel.
Exactly the same issue I had.
What I'm actually against, I'm really pro not being genocidal. I'm pro not starting wars for no reason. And I'm pro not kind of, fucking killing civilians and children and women and that kind of thing. That's what I really support. And in some cases, you can't let your kind of ideology cloud that vision. It's you can pretend that Russia are this kind of anti-neoliberal trad, fighting for the whatever bullshit. It's that just shows that you know absolutely nothing about the situation.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just fucking do some reading. And then with Israel-Gaza stuff, similarly, I think I'm not out there to change people's minds, but it's you cannot look at that situation with a heart and say it's okay, So it's well, does that make me a Fed? I think, I get lots of Israelis sort of accusing me of being a jihadi now, and I get lots of Russians accusing me of being a Fed. So I can't fucking win. I'm just going to carry on saying what I think is right.
That's what a Fed would say. That's what they say to me.
Exactly.
Whatever. Come and look where I live. I'm on the low end of the Fed salary if I'm a Fed, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. There's some spy film that came out recently. I think it's called Black Bag, and it's these two MI6 agents, and they're living in this fucking beautiful house. Senior civil servant money is pretty good.
It is.
Living in a 1-bedroom flat in Islington.
Yeah, look, the lad that was in he was in the bag. He was an MI5, I think, spy or something like that, intelligence agent, Gareth. The story? He was found locked up in the bag. Yeah, horrible, very weird story. But even the flat, I was like, that is such a nice flat. Crazy amounts of money, you know what I mean? But whatever it is, I think that kind of everything glows, everything. And don't get me wrong, there are probably people watching what I do that are feds, probably, and probably sometimes that's a good thing. Do you know what I mean? It's so long as they're not involved in what I'm doing, I would probably be I hope the government is watching the docs.
Well, it depends what you mean by Fed as well. I think.
Yeah, what does it mean?
I would say that a significant proportion of my audience work for the military, work in intelligence, work in whatever else. That's fine. Those people exist. I think there's a very big difference between that and those people are there specifically to tinker with the narrative or specifically to influence people. Actually, most of those people are just they're in the military doing a job and they follow our accounts because you need to understand what's going on in the world, and we're good at doing that. So it's do you see what I mean? I think there's a very big difference between it being a nefarious thing as the whole 4chan, how much of 4chan by the end of it was literally being run by accounts, sock puppet accounts of various nationalities, intelligence agencies, probably almost all of it at the end. Do you know what I mean? But that's not the case, I'm saying.
No, I know totally, and it's you get to a point, it's the kind of, I call it Cameron. I don't know if you remember, there was an interview and they were you would never talk to the police. He was no. They're what if your family was killed? He's no. It's bro, ACAB doesn't mean murder detectives. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thinking. I think it's just spiraled out of control. Anyway, what's next for you? What are you looking to do in the future?
Next is, I'm talking to a couple of people about some interesting roles, which I can't say specifically, but, something might come of that. The main things I'm working on, Yaya Labs, we've got a couple of products coming out, that trauma history generator thing, Truma, and then we've got another thing. We're developing a crypto token that's based on an agent with a human organoid brain that trades a certain type of food commodity and has the agency to go online and do its own research and interact. So it's basically like it's a sort of prototype cyborg commodity trader.
But it's all online.
It's all online, but it does have a human brain component. There's a company in Switzerland called Final Spark that makes human brain organoids, and we're running a bit of it through this organoid as a sort of dopamine reward system. So basically, when it makes successful trades, it gets this dopamine reward in actual human cells. And it's another thought experiment, but that's the main thing that we're working on.
What is a human brain organoid, sorry?
It's basically a cluster of human brain cells that operates as a mini computer.
Wow.
That's going to be...
That's like made in a lab or something?
It's made in a lab. They're grown. At the moment, they're pretty small, but they're looking to grow them into sort of mats, like flat layers of cells. This is going to be the next level of computing because it's so energy efficient. There's a company called something, I can't remember what it's called, Cortex something. Sorry, viewers, but I'll remember the name later. But basically, like that is going to be quantum computing and organic computing are going to be the next sort of frontiers because they are so much more energy efficient and they do really interesting things.
What, organic computing, so it's essentially...
Cells.
Like us.
Yeah. Bits of us.
Mad. How do they build that? What is it made of? I mean, cells, but like, how do they start?
Now, I'm no scientist.
No, I'm clearly not either.
But they get... you can grow stem cells. You can grow things from stem cells. I wish I could tell you more about this.
I'm just fascinated, but they're not got like a brain. It's grown completely from scratch, basically.
It's grown completely from scratch. They grow these brain cells into organoids, which an organoid is just a name for sort of mini organ that you get in a laboratory. A brain organoid is like, a brain one of those, but there are other kind of types of organoid. And I mean, it's at the moment they're quite rudimentary, but you can view them live. So we can look at it on my phone, like computing live. And I think it's like AI, it's the very beginning of this stuff. But what's that going to look like in 5-10 years?
Yeah.
So fucking cool. And I want to be there on, day one of exploring this stuff and seeing what happens. And, it's a sort of experimental art, like trollish thing to do, but it's also commodity trading. So like, I think there's not going to be much money in the sort of fashion industry, whatever, music industry in the future, but there's going to be money in finance. So I'm going to take creativity over there and see what happens.
Absolutely. And man, you've got to survive somewhere. And if you might as well do it in a fun way, right?
Yeah.
Are you having fun doing it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a fucking great time. Honestly, like, it's just, I don't know. Like, I don't know about you, but I really, really enjoy being online. I really love my audience. I love, like, everything about content. We live in the most fascinating time. Like, I've been alive through, I'm not going to give away my age because it's funny that people don't know, but I've been alive in a lot of decades, and this is the most fascinating time.
Do you really think so?
It's so interesting. Like, look who's running the US, and, like, look what's happening around.
It's very fun.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, you'd be in jail. Like, as soon as I heard that line, I was like, we're in a very funny era right now. Like, things are going
so
crazy.
entertaining.
Could just before we go, can you maybe explain like a little bit about like how you got to this stage? Like you said, you used to be like really into raving and stuff like this. I think it's like really interesting because how do you how do you become so interested and so like knowledgeable and creative in so many different things? I think it comes from like a very solid base, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got decent parents. My parents are both airline people. My father's a pilot, and mother's a stewardess, and was a stewardess because she retired. She stopped flying. But like, I grew up in a household where we had home computing when it started. My father used to kind of code basic stuff. I learned basic and bit of machine, what machine code was a long time ago. And I've kind of had that. I guess I had the types of parents who were just supportive as long as we were happy. Do you know what I mean? Which is so cool. Like, they never pushed us into doing anything, but they were like, as long as you're healthy and happy and, trying to do something interesting that you love, go for it. And I left school when I was 16 and just really, really fucked around for about 7 years doing like awful things, really awful things. And then kind of came back into some semblance of normality, went back to college, did like 6 years of study, got a master's. And then like, I think I got a bit sidetracked into print publishing, which is actually, I'm kind of glad I did it, but it was a bit of a waste of time. during which time I worked for Vice and, various other people like back in the mid 2000s. And I think I've just always had this like a lot of curiosity, really, really fascinated with culture and like being a bit trollish and having a good time. And putting all of that somehow together into a career, do you know what I mean? And it's worked out. Like, I think it's a struggle sometimes, do you know what I mean? And it's been really up and down, but like, the joy of doing that, like living your life that way the ups definitely more than compensate for the downs, as long as you're like trying to have a good time and follow your passions and whatever else. And like the technology stuff, I think I've always found it interesting. And now I'm like, do you know what? Just focus on that stuff because you understand it and it's so interesting.
Yeah, I definitely grew up online and I definitely went through a stage of hating being online. And then I realized that it is what you make of it. You know what I mean? It is what it is. It's like, I'm addicted to this. Like, you can stop and go and do something else. Like, you can be looking at something a lot, but it doesn't have to be this. Like you said, you can go and read something. You can go in a rabbit hole or whatever. Like, yeah.
There's also, somebody said something really astute. I can't remember who it was, but somebody online said something really astute about the difference between Instagram and TikTok. And Instagram and Telegram, they're quiet. You can scroll them and it's not taking up all of your senses. TikTok is demanding all of your senses. So, apart from touch really to a degree, but it's like that is a massive difference. I've never been into YouTube. I've never been into TikTok because I want to be able to sort of, treat it like a book. I'm definitely pre-internet generation. Like I grew up in like hanging out in libraries and just obsessively looking at books. And then that became the phone. Because, obsessively looking at stuff in books became obsessively looking at the phone. But I'm having the same kind of experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not just being like, brain lock.
It's how you use it, man, definitely. All right, man. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it, man. Really interesting. I could go on forever, man. Thanks for being the first one. I hope it was okay. Yeah? Cool, man.
That was a no-brainer, right? Nobody gives a fuck.